WordCamp. How are we?
We're great.
We're great. Awesome. Awesome. I'm very excited to be here, very excited to be doing this presentation on Core AI, what we're building, what the team's purpose is in WordPress, and where we want to bring the future of WordPress and AI. So I'm going to do a brief intro about the team, what we're building, things like that. Then we're going to jump into our core strategy called AI Building Blocks for WordPress. And then ideally open it up to questions where we can really dive into what y'all want to know, answer questions, and discuss amongst ourselves. So, the team. I'm James LePage. I am the AI lead at Automatic. Next to me is Felix Arntz, the senior software engineer at Google and a co-lead for the Core AI group. And Jeff Paul, VP of open source at Fueled plus 10up, also on the Core AI team. Not pictured, also on the Core AI team is Pascal Birchler. He also is a senior software engineer at Google. And if you've been around WordPress for any amount of time, you very likely have seen Felix's and Jeff's and Pascal's work. They are very integral to the project. They have been around. They know what they're doing. They're very impressive. And it's a really, really great team to be pushing on the future of WordPress and AI. So our goal here as Core AI is to steward the future of WordPress and AI. What does that future look like? So our team was founded and announced 2 months ago. In those 2 months, we've come out with a detailed strategy and went from ideas to code to working packages for the WordPress community to implement AI. If you scan the QR code, you'll be directed to a make.wordpress.org/AI article, which goes into great detail about the AI building blocks for WordPress. It's a good companion read for this presentation. Our entire goal here is to enable people on WordPress to use and implement AI effectively. And that's what this AI building blocks strategy is. How can we create central, unified packages to do the things in WordPress that we know will need to be done when it comes to AI? We've centered on 4 primary core building blocks: the PHP AI API SDK, the Abilities API, the MCP adapter, and AI experiments. Each one of these contributes a meaningful piece of a greater puzzle when it comes to building and implementing AI. It gives folks like plugin developers, hosting companies, freelancers, everybody in the industry the tools, the building blocks that they need to effectively implement, experiment with, and build AI solutions in a consistent, standard way. That's a really big focus of ours. We wanted a core AI group to give that unified approach to allow the entire community to come around one collection of building blocks as opposed to deviating and fragmenting into multiple directions. It allows us to use what makes WordPress great: the ecosystem, the contributors, the plugins, everything that's allowed WordPress to grow to power almost half the internet, exists for 20 years. We want to make sure that these building blocks help that ecosystem move into the next 20 years with AI. So with that introduction, I'm going to pass it off to Felix to speak about our first AI building block. We're going to run through each of them, tie it up together nicely at the end of this in a bow. And I do want to remember that we're going to open up to questions. So please start thinking and start writing down questions. We'll have ample time to answer them for you. So Felix.
Yeah. Thanks, James. I'm going to speak a little bit about this first building block, the PHP AI client or PHP AI client SDK. We only started building this about 2 months ago, but there has been thinking going on like for probably about a year that went into this project. Basically, the problem today of WordPress plugin landscape when it comes to AI integration is that most plugins, they just integrate with a single provider. And when I speak about providers, I mean things like Anthropic or Google or OpenAI. They're all these providers that provide access to their models. Most plugins today that bring AI features to the end users just integrate with a single provider. And there's a good reason for that, because all these different providers function completely differently. And if you want to support 5 providers, you have to put in 5 times the work. So why would you want to do that? If you just really want to be focused on building user-facing features with AI. This is where this PHP AI client SDK comes in. It It allows you to talk to any different provider API. So send a prompt, get a response back. You can do that with a single unified API using this SDK and talk to any of the providers with this unified API. And the benefit of that is like, think about what I said before. If we think this process through, where every single plugin would integrate with only a single provider, probably the one that the developers prefer the most, it really leads to problems to the end user, where in the future you have a site with 10 plugins, 15 plugins with AI features. You would need to get subscriptions with 5 different providers just because one plugin developer likes that one, another plugin developer likes that one. That's not good for the end user. And that's a problem that this AI SDK solves, because it keeps the effort to integrate with AI as low as you do for a single model, but you can support any model from any provider. And even from a developer perspective, this helps for you as a plugin developer, because even if you have, let's say, a preference for for an Anthropic model, for example, and tomorrow Google releases a new model that you like better, you can just switch, right? You can easily switch without re-architecting your code base. And this is the thing that the PHP AI Client SDK makes simple. It allows you to connect to LLMs with 2 lines of code instead of 200 or maybe even 2,000.
So it lowers the barrier of entry for a developer.
Exactly. So I'm going to pass it on to James for Abilities API.
Okay, so that was the first building block. The second building block is something called the Abilities API. And this is a bit different than Felix's mention of the PHP AI client, because it isn't necessarily related directly to AI, which I think makes it unique. It also makes it an API that is able to go and will go into WordPress 6.9. So this is coming very soon. It's an API that allows plugin developers, WordPress core, anything within WordPress to expose functionality in a unified way. What I mean by that is, if I'm a plugin developer, I have a bunch of features and functions and REST API endpoints and CLI commands. I can do a lot with this plugin. But if I'm an AI, or if I'm even somebody trying to look at a menu of things that this plugin can do, I have to go through that list that I just mentioned. That's difficult to expose this functionality, expose data to an AI. And that's only for one plugin. What happens if you have 10 plugins on WordPress? Abilities API tries to solve for that. It gives an API where developers and WordPress core alike can register in a standard, unified way what can be done with their features, their functions, their data. The ability is the base unit of this API. It's something that explains to a person, an LLM, another piece of software, here's what I can do, here's a defined input schema, a defined output schema, the data you put in, here's what you expect to get out, and a semantic description of that ability. Abilities is a WordPress API, so it plugs into the existing first-class features of user permissions, roles, capabilities, and allows you to really expose your functionality in a unified way. So it comes with WordPress core 6.9, but other plugin developers are able to register abilities of their own and contribute to this more global registry of almost a menu of what WordPress can do. And kind of where I'm pointing at is, now that we have this menu, now that we have this really solid but standard registry of abilities, we can provide it to AI in a multitude of ways. We can use this in a single-shot manner. I can have a sparkly button that attaches to one ability and does one thing, and you click it, that ability is AI-enabled. I can string multiple abilities together into a workflow. That can be for AI, but it can also be static. And I can go and dump a bunch of abilities into a box and say, hey, agent, hey, LLM, go find the right ability or the right collection of abilities for the job. So this is WordPress's way of exposing that beautiful ecosystem of 60,000 plugins and all the functionality that comes with it to LLMs, and also to command palettes and to developers in general. It's that unifying force behind things. This right now in 6.9 will be a server-side API, so you can register capabilities in PHP. but it will also cover the client. So we'll have complete coverage of the entire WordPress experience, queryable and triggerable in PHP, through the REST API, and through the front end when that client side exists. Plugins like WooCommerce are going to bundle abilities as a showcase and a way to start seeding that ecosystem of abilities for AI, as will all other automatic products and many other products in the ecosystem as well. And again, this is going core in WordPress 6.9. I think just today, which speaks to how quickly things are moving, this is available as a plugin within GitHub and a Composer repository within Packages, which is very fun because you can try it, use it, register your own abilities, and go from there. Related to the Abilities API is another building block, and this is a separate block, but it's dependent on abilities. And hopefully I can illustrate why this is important and impressive and fun momentarily. So I'm going to break this up. There are two words there, MCP and adapter. If you're deep in WordPress or deep in AI, you probably know what MCP is, but very briefly, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's an emerging standard in the industry, and it allows software to talk to LLMs and vice versa in a unified standard way. So examples outside of WordPress with MCP include Google Analytics and GitHub. They expose tools and resources, so things that LLMs and AI can do, and data that LLMs and AI can read through MCP. And it's called a server. So the GitHub server displays all of these tools, these capabilities. MCP provides a transport and an authentication, a means for authentication. So the other half of things, the AI can go and connect to these servers, these buckets of tools, use them to go and do things, gather data, act agentically, act in a single-shot manner, maybe do workflows. And you might be thinking, hey, he just mentioned that in the previous Abilities API. And that's kind of by design. The second word here is adapter. So the concept of adapter right now is for MCP. But I think the adapter concept is one of these things that can grow and mature and change with where AI goes. We're in an industry right now where things are changing very rapidly. MCP is very trendy. If you look it up, you'll see so much information about it. But all of that information kind of stops, I think like 8-9 months ago, because it didn't exist 8 or 9 months ago. So an adapter works with the Abilities API. Abilities API is how we register logic in WordPress. It's how plugins contribute this logic to this central repository. And that logic can then be adapted to the best protocols at the time. MCP is the best right now. It could very easily become the industry standard. But it allows, this adapter concept allows us to take that logic and adapt it out to MCP. This plugin and Composer package adds the functionality to say, for this ability, I need to transform it ever so slightly. I need to add authentication support. I need to add the transport for MCP. This is what that adds. But in the future, let's say a very brilliant mind called James creates James's better protocol, JBPC. And that's the thing that everybody starts using. That's the thing that I can connect my software to ChatGPT with, to Cursor with, to Claude with. We can very easily take the abilities registry and create another adapter, James's adapter. And that will allow us to connect to this protocol. And in a real-world example, we can look at agent-to-agent. That's another emerging protocol, somewhat similar to MCP, somewhat different. And because we have this logic, this registry within WordPress in the Abilities API, I can spin up another adapter. So this essentially makes my WordPress website an MCP server. The MCP server allows things like ChatGPT to connect to WordPress and use the abilities bundled into core, so basic content management features, reading, writing data, but also the abilities that are contributed to from plugins like WooCommerce. And I can expose all of that functionality to an AI, and I can use it as a consumer to go and interact with my website, bulk update things, manage content. But I can also continue to extend it. I can use MCP as a developer to build external agents that interact with WordPress. The possibilities are endless. So those are two related but different building blocks in the concept of an adapter. To close it out, I'm going to send it to Jeff to talk about the AI Experiments plugin.
Yep. So Jeff Paul from Fuel and 10up. The thing that I bring to this team and that the Fuel team behind me brings as well is we created an AI plugin for WordPress for a client back in 2018, open sourced that in 2019, and in the last 6 years have learned a lot about what people want, what people don't want, what experiences could be, what experiences should not be. And so bringing a lot of that knowledge that we've gained over the last 6 years to getting this team started. And the AI Experiments plugin kind of serves two purposes. One, for those of you in the room not like me that understood a lot of what these two guys said, it'll show you how to stitch together the Abilities API, the PHP client, and the MCP adapter to do a thing, right? To put a, like James said, to put a sparkle button in the editor, the block editor, the site editor, the admin to do a thing. It'll demonstrate what you can do, how you can stitch these things together. From the Fueled perspective, we're excited for this as well because some of these building blocks we've had to build and maintain ourselves on our own. Other plugin teams in the space or other agencies that have built AI functionality for their clients have had to do the same thing. So now the bar is raised because these things now exist. And the plugin, the AI Experience one, will kind of show and demonstrate different things you can do leveraging those components. Separately, if you are like me and don't understand a thing that these two guys just said, they're lovely, they're smart, they're engineers, I'm engineer-ish, engineer adjacent. The plugin will actually be functionality you can use in WordPress. Some of it will be what I consider to be essential sort of functionality, writing or regenerating titles, excerpts, that sort of thing. And others will be, like the title says, purely experimental. You're in the admin, you're in the editor, I want to build a 404 page that does this or that. My home page is broken. It's repeating posts between two different content sections. Help me deduplicate that content, right? Some of these things that people typically would struggle with, and AI is perfectly capable, and with these other building blocks can actually achieve and help with, right? So not just some essential things that you see in many AI plugins in this space, but also experimental things. Not intended in core, right? It'll be a canonical plugin intended to ship alongside the WordPress 6.9 timeline here in December. But unlike the Abilities API that is intended to ship in 6.9, the AI Experiments plugin will be external to core, will be available as a canonical plugin. And like I said, some essential things to help show off how to bring these different building blocks together, and then some experimental things just to see, what could AI do, how could it help. Again, leveraging those building blocks.
Also, Jeff, I want to shout out the plugin you were talking about earlier is called Classify from Fueled. That was the first plugin I used that had AI plus WordPress, and that was 2019. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
I'm going to cover a little bit how these different building blocks can be used together. Jeff already said, the AI Experiments plugin is what will, in practice, show how they work together, but I just want to give a little bit of context. As James already mentioned, the Abilities API is targeting to be merged into WordPress Core 6.9. So that's the one of all these pieces, which will be in WordPress Core very, very soon. For all the other building blocks, though, we want to take this canonical approach where it's either a canonical plugin or it's a canonical package. And when I say package, we mostly, when we speak about WordPress, we speak about, core or plugins or themes. But in this case, we have found that plugin dependencies is a thing, right? That was added to WordPress a few releases ago. But there are instances where a plugin doesn't want to depend on another plugin, and you don't want to require the end user to install another plugin to use your plugin. And that's one of the reasons why, for instance, we wanted to have some of these building blocks as packages. For those that know what Composer is, it's just you could pull these in with Composer, for instance, and you can they would be bundled into the plugin that uses them. And that means there's no user-facing dependency that they need to install or anything complex like that. So the way that this works is like the PHP AI client SDK that we spoke about first. That would be a package, and that package is actually WordPress agnostic, so it's purely focused on PHP ecosystem. So you could use it even in another project outside of WordPress. Then there will be another package around this, like WordPress AI client SDK, I suppose, which adapts the PHP generic package into a way that works specifically with WordPress. And that is, if you want to use AI inside of WordPress, if you want to make actual LLM calls in WordPress, that other package on top of the PHP AI client SDK is what you would use. And then for, well, the Abilities API, that's the easy one. That will be in core very soon, so you can use it without installing anything else or bundling anything else. The MCP adapter, it will also be packaged, but it will be package or a plugin, so you can really choose which way you want to use it. End users can install it and have an MCP server on the WordPress site, but also you could still bundle it in your plugin if you need that for certain purposes. And that's, I think I covered everything.
Yeah, I'll also mention that the approach that Core AI is taking is somewhat different than how we've approached some other development in WordPress, and it's by design. So AI changes very rapidly. You see every week some new news articles, some new protocols, some new model popping out. And that makes it difficult to push every single piece of AI engineering and packages and things into WordPress core. Because if OpenAI changes the way we talk to their models tomorrow, and that's in core, then what do? We have to do a point release, or I don't know. Scary though, right? So we take this approach of, let's build alongside core, and let's put the things that we know will be stable, the things that we know will be helpful, like abilities, with the concept of adapters, into core, and then keep the rest of things available as these composer packages for developers and as plugins for consumers. And these are canonical plugins and packages, the full backing and support of the WordPress project. But they sit alongside by design, and they allow us to move quickly. They allow us to do more adapters. When MCP changes their protocol, revises their versioning, we go and update the adapter, and it's available to everybody. It allows us to move quickly with AI. It allows everybody to build with the work that we do and remain nimble and agile. When you tie it all together into the AI Experiments plugin, the big thing is we don't know what the future will look like. We do know that these pieces will be used to build that future, and we know that we want to get to the end goal of these things being stable and available and usable as soon as possible. So we can start with the experiment, so we can play around with, do users want image generation? Do users want translation? What does that look like? How do we build it? Does it remain as a plugin? Does it go to core? Those discussions are enabled by this initial strategy. And that's kind of what I see as the next step. When the building blocks are stable, when they're done, obviously there's always work to improve, but then we get to the fun stuff, and we get to have everybody mess around and see what happens and build with these in established plugins like Woo, create new plugins with these blocks, or experiment with, maybe this should go core, maybe this should be a Gutenberg experiment. What does that look like? That's what this strategy, the Composer plus plugins sitting alongside core, enables. Yeah.
So these projects, they're all being in development right now. Some of them are very, very close, like James said, to being published in the first version. So look out for more news coming very, very soon. I just want to very quickly summarize for what use cases would you use each project? And from a technical perspective, basically, if you're building a plugin and you want to use AI inside of WordPress, so trigger an API call, like AI API calls inside of WordPress, you need to use the PHP AI client SDK. And you also need to use the Abilities API to give access to the tools that the Abilities API offers to the LLM that you call. So those two, if you're a plugin developer and you want to use AI inside of WordPress, those two are the main packages that you want to look at. If you are building a SaaS, for instance, like you might want to build, like for instance, a chatbot inside of WordPress that connects to your own SaaS. If you're doing that, you're not making LLM calls inside of WordPress. So at that point, you would need to look instead at the MCP adapter, because that's what makes the abilities from the Abilities API available to an agent that runs outside of WordPress. So this is basically a quick breakdown of those two use cases. And then if you are a plugin developer that doesn't really want to do anything with AI, I would still encourage you to look at the Abilities API, because using the registering what your plugin does in the Abilities API will allow any other AI-focused agent or plugin or whatsoever to use your plugin in an agentic way. And so that really applies to any plugin. Even if you don't want to do anything with AI, I would recommend you take a look at the Abilities API.
And if you're a consumer and you want to mess around, use the MCP canonical plugin that will consume those abilities and allow you to mess with it in ChatGPT or something like it. It's very choose your own adventure, I would say. Okay, with that, I think it's time to open this up to questions. So there are 2 mics on either side. 4 questions, we invite people to go up to the mics and ask the questions. If there are no questions, which I don't think will be the case, we have a lot to discuss, but I would love to open up the opportunity right now. And I see a question here.
Hello, my name is Alfredo, and I've been trying this for a while. I start with WordPress MCP, I think was the first one that I see. And then I jump into MCP adapter in the earliest stages, and I've been playing around. So as a theme developer or plugin developer, should I just use the MCP adapter with the Abilities API? Because I know I can create my own abilities too, if that's correct?
Yes, yeah. So it's very funny. At Automatic, I got very excited about MCP and experimenting with this stuff. So we created several early plugins, one of them being WordPress MCP, another being WP Feature API. Those were kind of the version 0.0s. And we built them really quickly. We experimented. We saw what broke. We saw what worked. And a lot of that thinking and learning went into the MCP adapter and the Abilities API. The future of AI in WordPress is Abilities as a central registry and MCP adapter as one of maybe many adapters to MCP, but maybe another adapter to something else. So as a plugin or a theme developer, if you, like Felix said, if you want your functionality to be available to anything, if you're building it yourself, or if you want to plug into future AI agents, Elementor's working on one called Angie, Automatic's working on one, then you just create these abilities, and everybody consumes these directly or through MCP, and you're kind of set for the future. And you can obviously build your own agent with the PHP client API. So that's the recommendation. We're kind of like in a little gray area of those packages still work and they still exist. As soon as we are ready to make these MCP adapters and the Abilities API, merge it to core or make it a canonical plugin, then we will depreciate and eventually archive those 2 packages.
Thank you.
I know there are burning desires to ask questions here.
Wow, that's bright. So a little bit more of a general question. My name's Brian, by the way. What do you see as kind of the biggest challenge that WordPress and the WordPress ecosystem faces kind of adapting to this new world that we don't know what 6 months is going to look like?
Felix, Jeff?
I think there is like two variants of the, like, to answer this question. Like, I'm thinking, from a technical perspective, like we need to catch up a little bit with the rest of the web ecosystem in bringing AI features to the end users of WordPress. I think that's where, adapting these building blocks is going to be crucial for WordPress to continue to remain relevant and bring the latest features that people are used to from other platforms, maybe into WordPress. There's then the other question, how AI, I don't know if that was your main question or the other part of the puzzle is maybe like, how does AI usage affect WordPress at the grand scale, like WordPress sites? I don't know if that was.
I think they're both great questions. So
I agree with that.
Answer both, because again, they're all different challenges, right? And so how we address them will
Right.
You know, some of it will be technical.
Right.
Some other.
I mean, I think obviously like people now use AI for anything to get information to, I don't know, book an appointment or something. And I think that's something that makes a big impact on not only WordPress, but the entire web, right? Like how is WordPress going to adapt in that world? How is the web going to adapt in that world? I don't have a good answer for this, but really, sorry, I'm losing my focus here.
I think if you asked anybody to forecast where the web will be in 5-10 years, and they gave you a super perfect answer, I wouldn't believe them. I don't think anybody can really forecast exactly what this will look like, which is a very big part of the core strategy of, okay, if we can't really like hit that bullseye, we could go directionally in one way or another, but if we can't hit the bullseye and create this 5-10 year plan that in 2.5 years I will release this and I'm not changing my ideas, then we should go and enable people to experiment and explore and move quickly and be agile, because that's how software changes over time. So that's WordPress in general. We need to make sure that the project itself is able to move and shift if it needs to. And that's part of the big piece of this initial strategy with Core AI. We build the pieces of the puzzle that allow folks to go and experiment. Do we want WordPress to be an agent generation platform? Should it do workflows? Should it be a content management generative experience? All of that starts on these building blocks, and these building blocks result in the experiments and the plugins and the basically how WordPress grew to where it is today, just with AI. And that helps answer the question. At some point, it does become clear, hey, this is where WordPress fits in to an AI future. Maybe it's doing exactly what it does now. Maybe it's doing something completely different. And we have the tools and the toolkit to allow that movement to happen. Felix and I were talking earlier about like generative experiences and the fact that content is incredibly important in an AI era, especially new human-created content, up-to-date news, products, information, things like that. Content management is not going anywhere. In fact, my personal opinion is that it's getting more important for AI because these models need content. We're going to see over the next couple of years the commercials and the way content creators and publishers interact with LLMs and AI labs. And as that kind of solidifies, I could see WordPress leading the charge due to our distribution on how content works with AI and how it's done in a fair way, as a project and as a technology. So having these core pieces of that puzzle so we can experiment and explore and make sure that we are able to capitalize on what we've always done well, which is content, which is becoming more and more important with AI. That's my goal with Core AI and with the project in general.
And I think a big part of that is also standardization. So if, like today, there's already MCP as an emerging standard for that part of the puzzle, but for instance, there's no standard for how do you talk to an LLM, which is why something like this PHP AI client SDK is necessary. There's also no standard or solution, to my knowledge, yet about, how do you, I mean, it's a very controversial topic, of course, like agents not bringing the traffic through to websites anymore. I think there needs to come up a solution for that, and maybe it's going to look different. Maybe it's not sending people to websites anymore, but still having a way to, for instance, have like news platforms still being financially paid for consuming their content. Maybe there will be a new standard for that. I think that's the kinds of things that are crucial for the future of the web in an AI-driven world.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, guys. My question is regarding science. I truly believe that open source is one of the best inventions of our modern time. Today we're hearing a lot about this MCP and the new technologies that you've been working on. It's more related to use big LLMs like OpenAI, Cloud, etc. But how about doing some kind of integration or something to work with Hugging Face and being able to work with the smaller models that as well are open source. So that's my question. What's the vision for the future in that area?
We talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that we want to include in this. Well, it's already included in the plan. It's not available yet, but our first focus was to make these big popular cloud-based LLMs available for everyone. But this is definitely on the list that we want to do. I think especially whether it's server hosted or client side, those LLMs are extremely important for when I think about how could this eventually be in WordPress core, I immediately think about those, because those are the LLMs that you can use without paying, without sending your data to some proprietary third party. And that's where things really align well with the open source project WordPress and using AI. So I think we're still a little bit early, where those models often have limitations. Well, I think they will always have limitations compared to the cloud-based one, but all the models get better all the time. So at some point, the longer we wait, the more of these server or client-side hosted models will be good enough for what you want to do, right? And so I think the more that happens, we can start integrating them into WordPress, into these projects for sure, but even I think into WordPress core.
Right, and I think you had gotten to it a little bit in the beginning of your question. Those models, those local ones, are more likely to be licensed open source in a manner that aligns with the project's values, and also may be ones that are trained on content that is also licensed in that sort of a manner. That's not necessarily a guarantee you get with some of the cloud-based ones either, right? So those sorts of, cloud-based is great, that's where we're starting. Browser-based and then local does open up opportunities that are a bit more closely aligned to the project's values, right?
Yeah.
And Jeff, you also mentioned with the experiments plugin several features that do make sense for models like that. Even if it's a cloud-hosted model, smaller open source models can do things like alt text and translations and the point to click on the sparkle button a bit better than these crazy agentic workflows. So it becomes really possible to think about, I'm going to have a purpose-built model or a fine-tuned model for one specific piece of the puzzle. It also becomes interesting to think about how we use WordPress as content management to help fine-tune those models, because that requires a lot of structured data, which is what WordPress is for. And then also, how do you run these things? How do you host these things through some of our packages and through some of the future plans of, hey, we can run in browser models. Google has an experimental program called built-in AI in Chrome. On the server, we can use Transformers PHP, which is a pretty cool project. And on the client, we could use Transformers.js. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think it's also one of those things where, yes, there's a core roadmap for our projects. We're going to do this and this and this. And we're focused on cloud models. But it's built in a way, it's designed in a way where everybody can add new providers, experiment, create a branch, experiment with that. So you could tomorrow see if you could wire it into built-in AI, and if it works, then it goes into the project, and we do an experiment with it in the AI experiments plugin. And that's the beauty of open source in general, outside of the open source models on Hugging Face.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey there. I have a question kind of adjacent to that one. Thinking about it from a product perspective, and especially an early integration phase right now, what you want to do is be able to say, hey, we have some really exciting AI-powered features in our product now. It's really exciting. But what you don't want to do is then subsequently say, it's super easy to get set up. All you got to do is go to OpenAI, set up a user account, get an API key, go in here, plug it in, copy, paste. Right? We just lost 99% of our customers because they don't know what I just said. And so what do you envision, especially in the early days of adopting this, where we're not putting the onus on the end user to figure out how to connect all of this to this external system and make it work? Is there a way hosts or others like that could get involved that would lower the bar to entry for this so that people are able to have AI-powered features without understanding that AI, or even having to know what AI really is at all? Felix,
I think this is
Yeah, I mean, I think I think this goes back to like when you look at WordPress, the open source project, which can of course run anywhere and everywhere. I think from that perspective, we need to give the flexibility of people using whatever they want to use, whether that's one of these cloud-based providers or a server-hosted, self-hosted provider somewhere. But I acknowledge that has like a technical foundation that you need to understand. You need to go through, get some API key and paste that somewhere, and that's not super intuitive. So I think that's where, like with many things in WordPress, there's either there's hosters or other managed WordPress setups that provide that infrastructure for you, that they could override. They could, for instance, override the way that this PHP AI SDK sets things up and just say, okay, you don't need to paste API keys anywhere. You just get our access to our SaaS serve. Like basically, you just get that out of the box, and that's how things just work, right? And I think going back to the previous question with the server-hosted and client-side models, though, when we get to that point, we're also at a point where you don't need to paste API credentials anymore. Things just work immediately anyway. So I think that's also very promising in that regard.
And would I, as the plugin developer, have to, like when I'm building my prompts to do things like build alt text and stuff like that, would I have to knowingly be, even though it's a unified model, like would I have to specify the model in the environment? How do I, as the plugin developer, know what models are available to me when I'm running these prompts? Do I have to worry about that?
You don't have to worry about it. You can worry about it. Like if you use the PHP AI client SDK, you can choose which models whether you want to use a specific model or whether you don't care which model is used for you, as long as it supports your use case, or you can, like basically it has the whole model discovery engine integrated so that if you just don't give any information which model or which provider you want to use, it will find a model and a provider that supports everything that you need for your current prompt. It does that automatically for you. So you can, and then you can say, I don't care which model it uses, or you can say, I want to use just that model, and if it isn't configured, I'm going to throw an error. Or you can say, out of these 20 models that can do the job, my preference list is that, then this, then this, then this. So like you can be as opinionated or not opinionated as you want to be.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marty. So the question I have is around security. Just kind of curious if there are any issues related, how do I, as like an end user, trust that the plugin that I'm using is secure, or as a developer, that the plugin can't be kind of abused or made to do things that I'm unsure about.
I think the same answer probably holds with WordPress core itself and the plugins that are available online, right? The code is free, it's open source, it's available. It can be inspected, it can go through security scans. This is not a walled garden, right? Like we're not trying to hide anything back. So it's out there, and kind of the same answers that would be like, how does WordPress scale to enterprise sites? How does it scale to host the White House? How does it scale to NASA and Disney, right? Like the same answers here is like, the platform is open, and anything that would have been a concern there is a concern with this plugin, sure, but also the benefits of the project and of WordPress also apply to the plugin. So, Felix, core committer, do you agree?
Yeah,
okay.
Nothing to add from me.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's John, and I have a question about the PHP AI package and how that compares, if at all, to like Vercel's AI SDK API. Is the intention to have like a unified API experience to provide streaming, responses against different LLMs? Is it a similar thing?
Very much so, yes. That's a very short answer. When we started building this, we looked at many different solutions. And unfortunately, the conclusion was that there is nothing really in the PHP ecosystem that satisfies our needs. But the Vercel SDK is one of my personal favorites that I looked at from the other ecosystems. And we're very much trying to cover the similar purposes, but in the PHP ecosystem. So things like streaming are all going to be included. Yeah.
That's great. I would love to be able to write like just a chat client that worked with both the PHP AI package and the Vercel SDK. Is that sort of a goal?
Right, and we're also going to have, as part of this, built on top of this PHP SDK, will also be like a Node.js, not Node.js, maybe just a JavaScript package that you will be able to use inside of WordPress to run client side, to call LLMs from the client side, basically, and it will still go through the WordPress server, through the PHP SDK, but basically you will have that API, the same API available in PHP and in JavaScript, so you could also do it in the block editor, for instance.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
We are over time, and I see our MC creeping onto the stage. I want to just say that this is a work in progress. You can see the make.wordpress.org/AI link. You can see the QR code to our general plan, and you can see the Slack channel. We want you to be involved. This is not just 3 people on a stage. It is a lot of contribution already. It's a lot of discussion, ideas. The way we shape the future of AI and WordPress is together. So check out those 3 surfaces, get involved, send me DMs. I love answering them. And let's go and build whatever that future looks like and holds.
Awesome. Let's put it together for